Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Tet Vav 15 of Bava Basra. We are closing in on finishing the first chapter of Bava Basra. We will, God willing, finish it on Friday. Um, in the meantime, we closed yesterday with one of probably, the top famous Gemaras in the sense that we identified who wrote all of the books in the Tanakh. And so that is what you if you want to go back and go over it, it's at the very bottom of Yudalid Amabet up to the where we're going to pick up, and now we're going to touch on the again we learned yesterday that Yoshua wrote the last 8 verses of the Torah, and we're going to address why that is and the fact that there's a debate about it, and then we're going to transition eventually to Eicha and spend much of today dealing with Eicha. So again, we are at the top of Tetvav Amud Aleph. We are, let me share my screen and we can get fully started. So um, we are on the ninth line of Tetvav Amud Aleph, and we are going to address the last verses of the Torah. So let's see what the Gemara has to share with us. And again, we noted that Yoshua wrote his book, naming Sefer Yoshua, and he wrote the last 8 lines of the verses of the Torah. You're looking for a Gemara? I thought I saw one here. Okay. All righty, here we go. Okay. So Amar Mar, you said in the brisa that we cited, Yoshua Kasav Sifro, that Yoshua wrote his book, Ushmona Psukim Shiva Torah, and he wrote the 8 psukim in the Torah, referring to the last 8 psukim of that deal with the death of Moshe. Tanya Kamanda Amar. So this brisa is like the one who says Shmona Psukim Shiva Torah Yoshua Ksavan. The Tanya that this is consistent with the person who says that Yoshua wrote the last 8 verses. The Tanya, because we have the following brisa, but Yamos Sham Moshe, that Eved Hashem, that Moshe, the servant of God, died there. The Efshar Moshe, the Masoras Hashas changes it from mace to Chai, Efshar Moshe Chai because of a Yamas Shamoshe. Is it possible that Moshe would be alive and yet write that and Moshe died there? Ela Adkan Kasav Moshe, the Umikan Ve'ela Kasav Yoshua. But rather, it was up to that point that Moshe wrote, and Yoshua wrote the rest. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, but Amri La Rabbi Nechemia, and it was either Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Nechemia who said that. Now, interestingly enough, there's a machlokas in Makos Daf Yud Aleph where Rabbi Nechemia and Rabbi Yehuda debate whether Yehoshua wrote part of the Torah, and there's a question as to what that's referring to in Maseches Makot, and we have these 2 views, but we don't say who says what, and so as a result, the question is which of the opinions here is saying this statement would to be determined by how one aligns those opinions in Maseches Makot. Amar lo Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon said back to whoever it was that said the first statement that it was real Yoshua that wrote the last 8 verses. Efshar Sefer Torah Chaser Os Achas. Is it possible that we got a Sefer Torah with 1 letter even missing? Because Uksiv, it was written in connection with Moshe having written the Sefer Torah. La Koach es Sefer HaTorah Hazeh, that Moshe took this Torah. It's a self-referential statement in the Torah that says that Moshe took the Torah and to give it to the Kohanim, I believe. And so as a result, this is at the end of Dvarim Lamed Aleph Pasuk Kaf Vav. And so as a result, it can't possibly be that Moshe would have not written it. Right? Because uksiv lakoach es sefer haTorah el ad kan Hakadosh Baruch Hu Omer. Rather, up until the point that Moshe died, Hashem would speak it, Moshe Omer v'kosev, and then Moshe would say it and write it down. Mikan ve'elach Hakadosh Baruch Hu Omer Moshe kosev b'dema. But at this point, and for these verses, Hashem said them so that Moshe would know what to write, and Moshe would write them b'dema. Now, what does b'dema mean? A couple of possible meanings. The general translation is tears, but even that doesn't tell us necessarily exactly what it means, because either it could mean literally writing tears, using tears as if it was ink, in which case there would be nothing on the page other than sort of like an echo or an etching in connection with the writing, or it could mean while he was crying, that to write something is about your own one's own death is a traumatic experience, and so it could be that that's what it's referring to. And then, of course, dema could also mean a sense of confusion, and so those are the three general understandings of what a dema might mean here. So Kamosha Namar Lahalan, and it's consistent with what we say later on, meaning how Moshe would write the entire Torah is consistent with the following. This is from Yirmiyahu, and it was said by Vayomer Lehem Baruch. Baruch was Yirmiyahu's sofer. Mipiv Yikra, from his mouth, Yirmiyahu's mouth, Yikra Eli, he would dictate, he would call out to me, et kol advarim ha'ela, all these things. Vani kosev al sefer b'dio, and I would write them down on ink, with ink. So Kaman Azla Had Amar Rabbi Yoshua Bar Abba Amar of Gidol Amar Rav. So 1 second. So let's take a look, and we'll see that there's a statement by Rabbi Yoshua in the name of Rav Gidol, who said it in the name of Rav, that Shmona Psukim Sheb'Torah Yachid Koreotam, that an individual can read the last 8 psukim of the Torah. Now, of course, we can all read anything. All we have to do is open up a book. So what does that mean? So Rashi tells us, Yachid Koreotan, it's about, it's right opposite the 2 dots of Yoshua Kasav Svaro in the middle of the text. So it's very close to where we're up to right now in the main text of the Gemara. Kolomar ein mafsikin behed. Rashi says that it means that when you call somebody to the Torah, you won't stop there. That if you want to make an extra aliyah, you don't make the extra aliyah in those psukim. So, but that's not the only view. The Rambam actually says that it means that you can read it with potentially without a minyan, and the Chacham Tzvi actually says that it means that you need to call somebody unique to be the Oleh for the last verses of the Torah, and that's exactly our custom. Our custom is to call somebody special to get that final aliyah. So lema udelo Rabbi Shimon. Maybe we'll say that it's not like that it's either like Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Nechemiah, and not like Rabbi Shimon, because after all, Rabbi Shimon's the one who says that Moshe wrote them, and so there's nothing unique about those last verses. So no. Whereas, of course, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemiah say that those verses were written by Yoshua, so of course it makes sense to treat them differently. So, afilu tema Rabbi Shimon. No, you can even say that it's Rabbi Shimon, because v'hol ishtanu. Once we made some kind of change, again, in the first verses, in the 98% or 99.9% of the Torah, Hashem would read it out, Moshe would call it out, and then Moshe would write it. And in these verses, he didn't write it in the same way. And so as a result, once we have a difference, we can have a different rule. Okay. Yoshua Kasav Sifro. So now we're going to talk about other books that reference the death of the person that we identified as the author. Because if, in fact, we have a problem with the Sefer Torah, why don't we have the same problem in the other Sfarim that these other people wrote? So Yoshua, we say, wrote his book, but we said V'haksiv V'yamaz Yoshua ben Nun Eved Hashem. But it says at the end of Sefer Yoshua, Parakuf Dalet, Pasuk Kaftet, that Yoshua, the servant of God, died. So the Aske Elazar. So it was finished by Elazar, one of the sons of Aaron. V'hachsiv Elazar ben Aaron. If you go to the last verse of Sefer Yoshua, it says that that Elazar died. So it was finished the Aske ben Pinchas. So Pinchas, the son of Elazar, and whose parsha is in 2 more weeks after this week. So then, so we can call that almost a Daf Yomi coincidence. He's the one who finished Sefer Yoshua. Shmuel Kasav Sifro. So Shmuel wrote his Sefer, but we have a problem. Now, of course, today we refer to Shmuel Aleph and Shmuel Bet, but it was really all one Shmuel. So and he dies smack in the middle. He dies at the end of Shmuel Aleph. So V'haksivu Shmuel Met again. That's a Shmuel Aleph Parakavchet Pasuk Gimel. So to ask a God Hachoze V'nasan Navi. So that was finished by God, who was the seer, who was a Navi in his own right, and Nasan the prophet. So that's who finished that. David Kosav Sefer Tehillim. So that finishes the concept of people who died, and how do we work those verses? So we've covered that piece. So now the Gemara asks about Sefer Tehillim. About that, we said David Kosav Sefer Tehillim Al Yedei Asar Zikanim. It says that David wrote the book of Tehillim with 10 elders, and we referred to the names of the 10 elders in the brisa that we cited. So, but we didn't reference somebody who has a Tehillim that bears that person's name. Nami Esan HaEzrachi. What about Esan HaEzrachi? That he's referenced as a contributor. So why don't we mention him? So Amarav, Esan Ezrachi Zehu Abraham. That actually we do mention him. We mention his other name, the name that we know him by, and that is the name of Abraham. So Ksiv Hacha Esan HaEzrachi. When it comes to Tehillim, it says it refers to Esan HaEzrachi. Ksiv Hasam Mi Heir Mimizrach Tzedek. Again, a reference to Abraham in Sefer Yeshayahu, where it says in Parak Mem Aleph Pasuk Bet, who inspired the one from the east, the righteousness. And so the one from the east refers to, which is sort of the same root as Ezrachi, refers to Abraham. Mm-hmm. So Kachashiv Moshe, the Kachashiv Haman, but 1 second. You have in that list of 10 Zekanim, 2 other people who are identical, meaning you chose not to reference Eitan Ezrachi because it's the same person as Abraham, but you reference both Moshe and Haman, and they are the same person. V'hamar Rav, Haman ze Moshe. Rav's the one who says that Haman and Moshe are the same person. Of course, we have to be careful. It's not Haman, it's Haman. So Ksiv Hacha Haman, Uksiv Hasam, B'chol Beiti Ne'emanhu. What's the understanding? It's that it's Haman is from the root of the word emunah, belief. And who is the one who is trusted and believed? That's Moshe. So as a result, that's how we know that he's also Haman. So Trey Haman Havu. So actually there were 2 Hamans. There was Moshe, and there was a separate person who was the author of Tehillim Peichet. Okay, so Moshe Kasav Sifro Uparshas Bilam V'Iyov, and we said that Moshe wrote not only the Torah, but he wrote the Parsha of Bilam. Again, another Daf Yomi coincidence, not quite this week's Parsha, but it's next week's Parsha. And he also wrote Iyov. Messiah Allah Rabbi Levi Bar Lachma. And this supports.
Is Bilam not part of the Torah?
What was that?
Bilam is not part of the Torah?
So it's a good question. So what do we mean? So there are a couple of different approaches that are taken. The simplest approach, maybe the most complicated approach, I'll start with that one, is to say that actually there was some kind of separate book, and some Rishonim say that there was a separate book about further details about Bilam, and that's what we're referring to. But the simplest approach is that unlike the rest of the Torah, where either Hashem was, where sort of someone within the Jewish people, was effectively present at all times, or an ancestor of the Jewish people was present at all time. If we go back to before Avraham Avinu, so this story, the story that we're going to read in next Shabbos, has no one within the Jewish people or their ancestors or their descendants that is connected and is watching what is happening. So it needs a separate statement to say that Moshe specifically wrote it, and that it wasn't somebody else who wrote it and moved into the Torah. So that's what I think is sort of the most logical, and certainly that's the way that resonates most with me. So the
And the Avraham we were talking about was Avraham Avinu?
Yes, the Abraham that we were talking about before was Avraham Avinu. Yes.
Somehow he helped write Tehillim?
Meaning, no, yes, somehow he helped write Tehillim. Yes, there were tefillot that he had, that of praising of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and those Tehillim were eventually written down by David HaMelech. So the Amar Rebbe,
in Parshat Balak, there's a reference to a separate sefer. There's a poem there and a reference to the Suf, and there's a whole, and it says this is a sefer that is written. So that maybe I don't know, maybe this is referring to that sefer.
It could
in Parshat Balak.
It could be that's exactly how those Rishonim who are saying that it's a sefer, they could be referring to that. So Eov b'mei Moshe Haya. So this, the fact that we just said that Moshe wrote Eov, that touches on the fact of when did Eov live. So
he was one of the
that's 100%. So that's a classic midrash, absolutely. That there were three advisors of Paro,
Eov and
Bilam. Those would be the three. So Bilam was the one who said that they should kill.
One of them said nothing. Eov said nothing.
Yisro said that it was opposed, and Bilam said that they should go. They should throw the Jewish people Jewish sons into the Nile. So as a result, obviously Bilam gets punished the way he gets punished. He's going to get killed in a couple of weeks.
And Eov is suffering.
Exactly. And it highlights, correct. It highlights, right, according to that viewpoint, it highlights that being silent is actually a bad thing, is being complicit. That's exactly right. And so as a result, very, very important lesson. But we are about to see that there are at least 9 other opinions as to when Eov lived. So we're going to now go through, we're going to deal with those opinions, or 8 other opinions. There are 9 total opinions as to when Eov lived. So the first opinion is that Eov lived at the time of Moshe. Again, consistent with that midrash, but that is not the only opinion. We're going to see that now. So Ksiv Hacha miyetain efo v'yikasvun milai, that it says in Eov, oh, would that my words be written now, efo, using that word efo for now, uksiv hasam, and uvama yivada efo. So how will it now be known? Again, using that same word, and that's Moshe saying it. That's in Shmot Parak Lamed Gimel, and so as a result, that consistent usage indicates that they both happened at the same time. 1 second. You want to say the word Apo means that it happened, that's when Eov lived. Ve'ema b'mei Yitzchak. Maybe he lived in the time of Yitzchak. After all, it says Diksiv mi Efo hu hatzad sayid. Yitzchak was speaking and saying, who was it that hunted that game? Meaning in connection with the brachot that he ended up giving to Yaakov instead of Esav. So it uses the word Evo. Yaakov, and you could even say it was in the time of Yaakov. Tiksiv imkain Evo zos asu. When it comes, this is again later on in Sefer Bereshis Parak Mem Gimel Pasuk Yud Aleph. Yosef, you could even say it means it's referring to Yosef. Evo Heim Roim. When Yosef was searching for his brothers, he asked, "Where are they?" Shepherding the flock. So lo salkadaydach. No, don't think it was any other time. Tiksiv mitain b'sefer v'yuchaku, that that they, namely referring to the words of Eov, were inscribed in a book. Moshe who de ikre mechokek, and he's the one who is called the inscriber. Tiksiv vayar reishis lo kisham chelkas mechokek safun. Right, this is a pasuk at the very exactly at the end of Dvarim and Zosa Bracha, referring to Moshe. It's referring to the fact that the family of Gad, the tribe of Gad, would end up taking land for itself, and there is where the one who inscribes was hidden. Namely, that's going to be the location of Moshe's burial. And so that is approach number one. Now, again, 9 different approaches. Here's approach number 2. Rava Amar Eov Bime Miraglim Haya. Eov, this is another famous midrash that Eov lived at the time of the spies. Ksiv Hacha Ish Haya Be'eretz Utz Eov Shmo, that there was a person who lived in the land of Utz and Eov was his name. Uksiv Hasam Hayesh Ba'etz Im Ayin. Right, so we say, what are there trees in it? Meaning what, and so that reference to Eitz and Utz suggests that they were both happening at the same time. Midami, are those similar? Haka Utz Hasam Eitz. Those are totally different words. How can you compare the two? So Haki Kamar Lahu Moshe Yisrael. Actually, this is what Moshe was trying to tell to the spies. Yeshno la'oso adam shishnoso arukos ke'etz. That there is somebody there whose years are as many as a tree. Umagin al doro ke'etz. And he's protecting his generation like a tree. And of course, we then hear that the Midrash says that there was a funeral. That's why the people in the land of Eretz Yisrael were so distracted, and they didn't bother with the spies, and the funeral was for Eov. Eov passed away during the time of the spies. So again, not completely. Of course, these could both be on some level consistent with one another, meaning that the era of the spies and the era of Moshe are consistent, but the point is that it's giving us additional context that is not necessary for the first opinion. Okay, so that's opinion number 2. Now we have opinion number 3. Yosef Ahum Rabbanan, there was a certain scholar, a certain rabbi, Kamei de Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani Yosef Kamer, that he was sitting and saying in front of Shmuel Bar Nachmani and saying the following: Eov lo haya v'lo nivra. Eov never was and never was created. Ela mashal haya. The whole story is a parable. Now we're going to undermine this approach and effectively reject it. But again, this is an approach that is approach number 3. So Amar lei alecha Amar kra. 1 second. Ish haya be'eretz utz Eov shmo. We give all these details. So how could you say that he wasn't never existed? Elamiyata vilarush ein kol ki im kivsa achas ketana asher kaneh kana v'yechayeha. Well, 1 second. What about when Natan Hanavi tells David HaMelech the analogy, the parable of the poor man who had just one sheep, and the rich man takes it away? You're going to tell me that also is something that actually happened. Mihava, did that happen? No, of course not. Ela mashal ba'alma, it's simply a parable. So hachinami mashal ba'alma, meaning you can have details and still be a parable. Well, in Cain, Shmo v'shemiro lama. Why bother with the name and the name of the town? So clearly that shows that Eov must have existed. So Rabbi Yochanan, so that's opinion number 3, which is rejected, but is again a third viewpoint. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Lazar, Amri Tarbayu, they both say Eov me ole gola haya. Eov. Now, again, the first opinions would have indicated that he was presumably and clearly not Jewish. But now we have an opinion that would suggest that he is Jewish. He was one of the people who came up from exile. Ubeit Midrasho b'Tiveria haya, and he actually had a study house in Tiberia. So Meisvei, 1 second. Yemesh no sav shel Eov misha shenichnasu Yisrael Mitzrayim v'ad sheyatzu. 1 second. We have a brisa that tells us that Eov lived from the time the Jews entered Egypt until they left, which is 210 years. So how could he? Doesn't that show that he lived during those 210 years? No, Ema doesn't necessarily mean that. Ema kimisha shenichtasu. It's he lived for that long. That's how long he lived, but it's not necessarily when he lived. Okay, so Meisvei. Well, 1 second, another question on you, because what about the following? Shiva Nevi'im Nisnabu Umas Ha'olam. There were 7 prophets who prophesied for the other nations of the world. The Elohain, Bilam v'Aviv, Bilam and his father, v'Iyov, Alifaz HaTeimani, Uvildad HaShuchi, v'Tzofar Hanami. Those are the 3 friends, Hanamasi. Those are the 3 friends of Eov, Eliu ben Barachel Habuzi, and so we have each of these, and Elihu is also one of the friends of Eov, and so we have all these 7, and presumably aren't these not Jewish? And so as a result, doesn't that conflict with Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar's teaching? So no, not necessarily. Elihu ben Baracha Lam Yisrael Hava. Well, if according to that basis, Elihu would not be Jewish either. Ram, and yet it says that he is from the family of Ram, and Ram is an indication, according to Rashi, that it's that he's from the family of Abraham. So as a result, that that suggests that he's actually Jewish.
No, not necessarily, because Abraham, he was the first Ivri. He wasn't really, and he had brothers and that were not Jewish. He himself converted. So this doesn't. It's not a raya that he.
That's true. It's not a perfect right. 100%. I mean, that's how it's understood, but you're absolutely right. It's not a perfect right. And of course, if that were the case, it would it suggest, does it undermine one of the other, the timeline that we have been suggesting? Because, if he's actually supposed to be Jewish, so then does it have to be post the giving of the Torah? So that again, a little complicated. Ella inabe leumos holam. No, well, all it's saying is that Elihu prophesied for and to the nations of the world. So hachinami Eov inabi leumos holam, and so too here. So when it comes to Eov, he prophesied for the other nations of the world and to the other nations. So 1 second, atu kul navi milo inabi leumas holam. Well, 1 second, every navi, some of their prophecies were for the other nations. No, again, but that we can undermine that, because Hasam Ikar Neviyu So the Yisrael, Hacha Ikar Neviyu So Umas Holam. So the question is who was their primary focus? And for these 7, whether they were Jewish or not Jewish, they were for the prophecies that they offered were primarily for the non-Jewish world, and so that's why they are listed here and no other Navi, even though other Nevi'im also had prophecies for the whole world and not just for the Jewish people.
Wasn't
How about Yonah?
for the Jewish people? He's listed as one of the prophets.
Yes. So again, so both of those are. I'm sorry. So let me deal with Yonah first, and then I'll come back to you, Ken. So with respect to Yonah, so clearly you're absolutely right. He definitely prophesied for Nineveh, but the message, which is an interesting message, the message of Sefer Yonah is viewed primarily for the Jewish people. Indeed, the whole reason that he refused to go is because of the message for the Jewish people, of the concern that it was going to make the Jewish people look so bad. So again, not a perfect answer, I recognize, but I think that's definitely the likely explanation for why that's the case. Now, what was your question, Ken?
Eov is considered considered one of the prophets.
Yes, 100%.
But so he prophecy with the Jewish people more,
So we're understanding that the key message of Sefer Eov is actually for the entire world and not primarily for the Jewish people. And actually, if you were to think about, from a Navi perspective, which Navi really does, resonate, I think there is an argument to be made that Eov is the Navi that resonates most with the non-Jewish population. That if we think about Job as a prototype of a particular character and how we deal with the problems that life throws our way, I think that there's an argument to say that it really was for the entire world and not for just for the Jewish people. Okay, so Meisfei, so now we're going to ask a question, and we're going to then answer that question by saying, hey, we have more timelines as to when Eov may have lived. Because Chassid Haya, we have a brisa that says Chassid Haya be'umos ha'olam v'Eov shmo. There was a righteous person among the nations, and his name was Eov. Lo vala olam ela kadei lekabel scharo, and he came into this world only to receive his reward. Hevi Hakadosh Baruch Hu alav yisurin hitchel mecharef umegadif, and then God eventually inflicted him with suffering, and he began to curse God and to curse in general. So kafal lo, insult God and curse. Kafal lo Hakadosh Baruch Hu uscharo ba'olam hazeh, and so as a result, God doubled his reward in this world, kedei latardo min ha'olam haba, in order to prevent him from getting any award in the world to come. So this obviously has a very harsh view of Yisro, but it's a clear view that he wasn't Jewish. So how do you? I'm sorry, I said Yisro. Thank you for correcting me. I meant Eov. A clear view. So this brisa has a clear view that Eov was not a great person at the end of the day, but it also has a clear view that he was not a Jewish person, but rather from the other nations. And so how do you deal with this, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar? So
I thought specifically he refused to curse God.
Sorry?
I thought he refused to curse God.
We are going to spend much of the rest of today and tomorrow going through the first chapters of Eov, and we're going to go through that exact thing. Yes, for sure, his initial reaction is definitely positive, but how we interpret what happens later in Sefer Eov is much more complicated. So Tanai, so actually this whole thing is a machlokas Tanaim, because we got a brisa that's going to offer us 5 more opinions as to when Eov lived. Tanya, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Lazar says, Eov me shafot hashoftim haya. Eov lived at the time of the judges judging. Shenemar hein atem kulchem chazisem v'lamazeh hevel tiabalo. Because Eov told his friends, you've seen everything that happened to me, and why do you act in this false manner? Eza Dor Shekulu Hevel. What was the generation that acted in a false manner? Havi Omer Zed Dor Shel Shvot HaShoftim. That was when the judges judged. So that shows that he lived then. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karka Omer. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karka offers another opinion. Now our sixth opinion. Eov bimei Achashverosh. He lived at the time of Achashverosh. Shene'emar v'lo nimtza nashim yafot v'not Eov b'chol haaretz. That there was no one as beautiful in the world as Eov's daughters. So that shows, and Ezahu Dor Shnisbakshu Bo Nashim Yafot. When did they look for beautiful women? This Havi Omer Zed Dor Shel Achashverosh. That's the generation of Achashverosh. So the Gemara wonders, well, 1 second, there was some other searches for beautiful women. The aim of it made David, maybe it was in the time of David. Because they searched for a beautiful maiden. So Hasam Bechol Gvul Yisrael. No, that doesn't work because that was just a search within the boundaries of Israel. Hacha Bechol Haaretz, in all the world, all the land. So as a result, it must be that they were determined to be so beautiful at that time of Achashverosh. So again, that's opinion number 6. Now opinion number 7. Rabbi Nassan Omar. Eov bimei Malchus Sheva Haya. He lived during the kingdom of Sheba. Shenemar vatipol Sheva vatikachem. Because it says in the beginning of Eov that when he's losing, when everything is being taken from him, all his possessions are being taken, it says that Sheba attacked. And so therefore that shows that that's when it was in the time of Sheba. So, and that would have been around when Shlomo HaMelech was the king, because he's the one who married Bathsheba. So Chachamim Omrim, Chachamim say Yovamei Kastim Haya. He was lived in the time of the Kastim. Shneamar Kastim Samu Shlosha Rashim. There were, again, in connection with the loss of all of his possessions, it says that the Kastim put out 3 divisions and they took all of his camels. The Yesh Omrim, and some people say, so that was opinion number 8, and final opinion for the moment. We're going to see a 10th opinion in a little while, but the Yesh Omrim, Eov bimei Yaakov Haya. He lived in the time of Yaakov. V'Dina bas Yaakov Nasa, and he actually married Dina, the daughter of Yaakov. Ksiv Hacha kidaber achas hanivalos tidaberi. That you talk like one of the loathsome women, nivalos. Ksiv Hasam. And that's in connection with in Eov, where Eov is saying this to his wife. And Uksiv Hasam ki nivala asa Yisrael, that she had committed a loathsome act. I'm sorry, that he had committed, naming Shem, had committed a loathsome act in Yisrael. So as a result, since the same word is used with respect to 2 different women, we're going to say that they are the same woman, and therefore that will give us a timeline for when Eov lived.
We on the previous element, we quoted that Eov may have lived.
Correct.
May Yaakov.
Right.
So
we rejected that, right, because that was based on the word apho. And so as a result, we're now offering, again, the point is that we have 9 different opinions. That's exactly right. V'kulo tanai svirul Eov Yisrael hava. And all of these think that Eov must have been Jewish, Levar mi Yesh Omrim, except for the Yesh Omrim, because the Yesh Omrim, meaning all of these last 5 opinions, all think that he was Jewish, because only that last opinions, which said that he lived in the time of Yaakov, because if you were to say that he lived from the nations of the world, Basar deshachiv Moshe mishar yeshchina al ovdei kochavim. After Moshe died, was there any divine presence in the world? Now, of course, the truth is that yeah. Okay. So the
we're saying here that we're assuming he was Jewish except for the Yesh Omrim.
Correct, because
when we quoted his friends, then we said he was not Jewish, right?
Correct. Correct. Exactly.
So it's not only here; it's up there as well.
Correct. So we are only talking about the 5 opinions that we just mentioned in this brisa. One brisa mentioned 5 different opinions, and so of those 5 opinions in the brisa, Rabbi Lazar was the one who said he lived at the time of the judges. So again, that would be Jewish. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karka said he lived in the time of Achashverosh, Jewish. Rabbi Natan said he lived in the time of Shva, that Jewish, namely Melech Shlomo. The Chavim said he lived at the time of the Kasdim. So again, Jewish. Only the Yesh Omrim said he lived at the time of Yaakov, so then he would be not Jewish. Rabbi Yochanan, so Amar Rabbi Yochanan, I'm sorry. Sorry. So skip down. Right. The Isa, right, exactly. Because Basa Deshachim Moshe Misharya Shchina Al Ovdei Kochavim. Did they live after that? V'Hamar Mar Bikesh Moshe Shelo Tishra Shchina Al Ovdei Kochavim. Moshe asked, according to another brisa, that that Hashem not put God's presence on non-Jews. V'nasan and Hashem granted that request. Niflinu ani v'amacha, that I and your people are going to be different. That's a statement that Moshe made in Sefer Shmot. Okay, so Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Dora shal Iyov shatav b'zimahaya. The generation of Iyov was very immoral. Shneimar hein atem kulchem chazisem b'lama zeh hevel tebalu. That you have all gazed. And so that gazing is suggesting an immoral type of looking. So why do you act in that manner? So uksiv shuvi hashulamis shuvi v'nechazebach. Meaning, how do I know that gazing refers to improper gazing at women? Because it says in Shirashirim that that the man in the story there says, I want to gaze at you, and so again that's in a sexual relationship. So Ema ben Nevuah. Oh, 1 second, but we also have Chazeh, meaning a prophetic vision. Diksiv Chazon Yeshayahu ben Amutz, because we have Chazon Yeshayahu. So Im Kain Lama Zeh Hevel Tebalu Lamali. But then the end of the verse doesn't make sense, meaning he's rebuking his friends. So as a result, it must be an improper kind of gazing. V'amar Rabbi Yochanan, another statement of Rabbi Yochanan. My diksiv vayihi b'mei shafot hashoftim, that it was in the time that the judges judged. Dor sheshofet es shoftav. This is a generation that judges its judges. Omer lo tol kesa mibein shinecha, that if a judge is going to say to you, one of the litigants, that you should remove the splinter between your teeth, Omer lo, the litigant says back, tol kora mibein inecha. You think I got problems? You got problems. You need to remove the beam from in front of your eyes. Amar lo, kaspei chayal lesigim. Judge says, oh, your silver is all tainted. You're not actually giving silver. You're giving other stuff. Amar lo, savech mahul b'mayim. Your wine is mixed with water, so you're not giving wine. The bottom line is that nobody is clean enough to provide any kind of judgment. Okay, so now a second statement regarding one of the verses that we just mentioned. So Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kol haomer Malkas Shava Isha Haisa Eno Elatoa. Anybody who says that Malkas Shava is a woman, meaning that it's a queen of Sheba, that's a mistake. My Malkas Shava, what does that mean? Malchusa de Shava. It's the monarchy of Shava, namely the king. All right, so now we're going to that finishes sort of the discussion, and now we're going to begin our discussion of the opening psukim, opening parak and a half or so of Iyov, to understand the conversation that happened there. Vayihi hayom vayavo b'nei Elokim liyisyatzev al Hashem vayavo gam hasatan b'socham. So on a certain day, the angels came to stand before Hashem, and the Satan came with them. But Yomer Hashem el Satan, and Hashem said to the Satan, Mi'ayin tavo v'yayin hasatan. Where are you coming from? And the Satan answered. And so let's go through. So now we're going to clarify this exchange a little bit more. Amar lefana, because what was the Hashem responding to that Hashem asked, where do you come from? So the Satan said the following, Ribono Shalom, Shatati b'chol ha'olam kulo. Or this is what the Satan said in response to Hashem asking, where do you come from? Because the end of the pasuk says that the Satan answered that he came from exploring the earth and wandering about. So the answer should be understood to be the following: Shatati b'chol ha'olam kulo. I explored the entire world. V'lo matzasi ne'eman ka'avdecha Avraham. I found no one as loyal as Avraham. Shamarta lo, that you said to him, kum hishalech, using that same word, that hishalech, that is referred to in that seventh pasuk of the first parak of Iyov, that the Satan uses. So that word is also is what Hashem said to Abraham. Exactly. And in Parshas Lech Lecha, that's exactly right. Right? I'm going to give it all to you. And nonetheless, notwithstanding God's promise, when he was unable to find any place to bury Sarah, until he bought some land for 400 shekel of kesef. Lo here achar midoseka. He didn't question how you acted. He just believed that Hashem would eventually give the land to him and his descendants. There was not any kind of conflict that resulted from him saying, "Hey, God, why haven't you come through?" But Yomer Hashem el Satan hasamta libucha al avdi Iyov ki ein kamo ba'aretz. Oh, Satan, have you paid any attention to Iyov? There is nobody like him on earth. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Gadol hanemar be'Iyov yoter mimasha nemar ba'Avram. It's greater what Hashem said with respect to Iyov than what Hashem said with respect to Avram. De'ilu ba'Avram ksiv ki ata yadati ki yirei Elokimata. I know now, in connection with Abraham after the Akedas Yitzchak, I know now that you fear Hashem, then you fear God. Uvi Iyov ksiv ish tam v'yashar yirei Elokim v'sar meira. Not only do you fear God, but you avoid evil. So umay v'sar meira. What does it mean that you avoid evil? Rabbi Abba Bar Shmuel, Iyov Vatran b'monohaya. Iyov was very loose and we'll see permissive with his money. Min hagosha the rest of the world had the custom no sin chatzi pruta lechenveni, that if in fact, Rashi explains it, if in fact you hired somebody and said you were going to pay them a half a pruta, so you're going to pay them a half a penny, so there's no coin a half a penny, right? In this country at this time. So how would you deal with it? You would buy something that was worth a penny, and then you'd cut it in half. Iyov vitra mishalo. Iyov would say, no, I'll just give up my portion. And so as a result, we see the kindness of Iyov, and we're going to see a number of the merits associated with Iyov as we continue on through the daf, but we are not yet finished, and indeed, how did the Satan respond to Hashem saying, have you paid attention to Iyov? So for that answer, you're going to have to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Wishing everybody a wonderful, wonderful day, and looking forward to continuing our learning tomorrow.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good day.
Thank you, Rabbi David.
One more.